Assalamu alaikum students, welcome back to class. This is your ENG552 American Literature class, and in this class we've discussed a number of things. We started off with Emerson's essay on self-reliance, and we went on to discuss a couple of short stories, of which one was Zora Neale Hurston's. Then we had a chapter from The Adventures of Tom Sawyer by Mark Twain, and we did some poems also. Currently what we're doing is a drama by the renowned American, contemporary American dramatist Tennessee Williams, and this is one of his famous plays. This is a play which Tennessee Williams saw performed on the stage, and you know, Williams is one of those dramatists and playwrights who during his life saw his plays performed on stage in a number of different American and European cities, and he also witnessed some of them being made into films. And of course, you know, Streetcar Named Desire was one of the hit movies of the time. So was Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. The play that we're doing now, The Glass Menagerie, is very representative of the time in which Williams was writing. And let me emphasize a couple of things here before we go on with today's lecture. One of these things is that contemporary writings, and Williams is most definitely a contemporary playwright, contemporary writings, particularly in the United States, do not offer any kind of instruction. They do not moralize. For example, you go back to the times of Chaucer and Spenser, and you see that there is a definite tone of instruction. You read Spenser's Fairy Queen, and you know that that's an allegory. So what is being said between the lines is what you should do and what you should not do. But whatever we observe of writing in the 20th century, particularly the second half of the 20th century, there is no such instruction. There is no do's and don'ts. There is no right or wrong. What writers have done and are doing in the 20th and 21st centuries is that they are presenting the situation as it exists. It is up to the reader or listener or the audience to decide whether there is any instruction or not. It is up to the reader to decide for himself or herself how he or she wants to use the text. So there is no instruction, no moralizing, no lessons that are being taught. And particularly when we come to The Glass Menagerie, Williams is writing about a lower middle class household. But this is not an ordinary lower middle class household, because the person who's sort of heading this family, Amanda Wingfield, does not let the audience or her children forget that she comes from a rich background. She comes from a background that was financially established, and her family was not the kind to live in such a small house. They lived in huge houses. I'm jumping a bit. Let me go back to what we've done so far before we continue with the lesson that I have prepared for you today. So The Glass Menagerie, the title refers to a collection of glass animals that the daughter of the house, that is Laura Wingfield, has, and which she keeps in the living room. She has all these animals in a bowl, and this bowl has been put inside a cabinet, and she looks at it from time to time. She takes the animals out, she cleans them, washes them, dries them, and then puts them back in the cabinet. Now, the situation is such that when the play opens, we see the narrator of the play, that is Tom Wingfield, who is Mrs. Wingfield's son. And he tells us that he is not only the narrator, but he also has a part to play in this drama. So he's one of those narrators who not only play the part of the omniscient narrator, but also have a role to play, also act within the play itself. So they are inside the play as well as outside. And when you see Tom Wingfield, you see him dressed in a merchant sailor's uniform, and from there he at once joins in the action when his mother calls out to him. One of the things that Williams emphasizes for this play is that this is basically a memory play, and since it's a memory play, the facts, such as they are twisted. It's not a realistic play. It's not a play in which you can say, oh, this cannot happen, or this is how the dramatist should have portrayed it. You cannot do that. The dramatist has sole power. He says it's a memory play and therefore unrealistic. And some of the things I've already pointed out to you that are unrealistic. Others I'll point as we continue with the text. One of these things is the fact that Tom appears at the top of the fire escape, which is the main entrance into the apartment. And he is looking back, in the sense that this is a memory play, and he's thinking of events and circumstances that lead to his appearance in this place, and at the same time which are responsible for his physical appearance. As I told you, he's dressed as a merchant sailor. What leads to his becoming a merchant sailor is what he's discussing here in this play, and what he's showing to us through the action, through the different characters. There are 4 characters that appear in this play. You have Amanda Wingfield, her daughter Laura Wingfield, and her son Tom Wingfield. And then you have a character who appears right at the end of the play, and that is the gentleman caller. And I explained to you in the last lesson also what exactly is meant by the term the gentleman caller. And then there is a character who doesn't actually appear physically, and this character is that of Mr. Wingfield. You are shown Mr. Wingfield in the form of a portrait, and this portrait is hung on one of the walls in a very prominent position. So you can't really miss that portrait. All through the action, you see Mr. Wingfield looking down on what is happening, looking down on the audience, looking down on the stage. Williams gives very detailed instructions and directions about what is happening in the stage, what the props of the play are, etc., etc. And one of the most important props of the play is this screen. On this screen is the legend. And the legend refers sometimes to the action that is taking place on the stage. More frequently, it refers to something in the past, which would be difficult for the audience and the readers to imagine if that legend were not shown there. For example, when we are first introduced to Amanda Wingfield, the legend in French says, translated, "Where are the snows of yesteryear?" And that's a reference to the fact that Mrs. Wingfield lives in the past, because the past was more glorious than her present. She claims to come from a rich family. She claims to have seen better times, and she cannot reconcile herself with the circumstances in which she finds herself currently, and which is the result, as Tom tells us, of Mr. Wingfield having abandoned them. He abandons his family in the sense that he just disappears one fine day, and nobody knows where he is until they get a postcard from him with no address whatsoever and with 2 words on it: "Hello, goodbye." So they know that he is alive, but where he is and what he is doing is something that none of these people know. So the point at which we left off in the last lecture is where Laura, hearing her mother coming in, goes and sits before a chart, a typewriter chart, because she's supposed to be taking typing and shorthand classes. Now, typing and shorthand probably you people are not even aware of, but they were essential requirements for a personal secretary. And this, of course, is before you had these computers and these handheld devices that have become so common now. So when you wanted to take notes, then bosses would speak and secretaries would take down whatever instructions in shorthand, and then they would go and type out everything. And you would have the first draft, and you'd have the second draft, and God knows how many drafts, until the boss got what he or she was looking for, and that was what the secretary was supposed to be for. So Laura Wingfield is supposed to be doing a secretarial course. What she's doing actually is what we're going to find out in this lesson. So when she sees her mother, when she hears her mother coming in, she quickly goes and sits before the chart and pretends as if she's trying to memorize the position of the letters of the alphabet. Amanda comes in, and in a very theatrical way, she makes her entrance. And what she does when she makes this entrance is exaggerate all her feelings and her thoughts, and of course the resulting actions also. So she's a very theatrical woman, and she dramatizes even tiny occasions. So she's holding an enormous black patent leather pocketbook, that is a purse, and she's wearing clothes that she normally does when she goes to the meeting of the Daughters of the American Revolution, which is a group of people who sit together and who discuss their antecedents, their ancestors, and think of how they can improve the conditions of the present day and age. So when she comes in, she is dressed for her D.A.R. meeting, and before she enters, she looks through the door. When she sees Laura sitting before the typewriter chart, she purses her lips as if she's unhappy, and then she slowly enters. So like I said before, very dramatic entrance. Laura sees her mother's expression and at once becomes nervous, because, as I said before, Mrs. Wingfield has a tendency to dramatize everything. And Laura is a very timid woman. She's unmarried, she's timid, and she's very easily scared by the dramatic performance of her mother. And it's like Laura has been sort of caught on the defensive. So she says, "Mother, I was," what she's trying to say is, "I was just studying the chart." But when she looks at Amanda, Amanda looks at her, and then, you know, the look that she gives is that of a martyr. It's like she's being killed for a righteous cause. And the way in which she starts speaking, of course, is also very theatrical. Notice the words she uses. Deception, deception. So she slowly removes her hat, her gloves, and she does not offer any explanation at all. And Laura at once, because she's guilty, she says, "How was the meeting?" And you'll see the theatricality in Amanda's gestures. She slowly opens her purse, removes this beautiful, delicate white handkerchief, and with that, she touches her lips and her nostrils as if to show that she has been crying. Now, she's not actually been crying. This is just dramatization and trying to get maximum benefit out of Laura's undivided attention. So when Laura asks her, "Didn't you go to the D.A.R. meeting?" Amanda says, "No, no, I did not have the strength to go to the D.A.R. In fact, I did not have the courage." So, you know, a lot of theatricality. Pardon me if you don't like the way I utter these sentences, but I can imagine Amanda Wingfield as a woman who is what we call these days a drama queen, who dramatizes everything that happens to her. So she says, "You know, I didn't have the courage. I wanted to find a hole in the ground and hide myself in it forever." So height of embarrassment she shows, and she says, "You know, if I could have found a hole in the ground, I would have sunk into that because I was so ashamed and so embarrassed." So the next thing that she does is she goes over to the wall where there is the diagram of the typewriter keyboard. She holds it in front of her for a second as if she's looking at it, and she makes sure that the audience and Laura Wingfield know what she's about to do. And then she very dramatically tears it into two pieces. Like I said, theatricality of Amanda Wingfield's gestures has to be noticed. And Laura says, "Why did you do that, Mother?" And instead of answering her, Amanda Wingfield again moves to the wall. She takes hold of the chart of the Greek alphabet, and she tears that into two pieces also. And at the same time she says, "Why? Why? How old are you, Laura?" And Laura says, "Mother, you know my age." And Amanda says, "I thought you were an adult. It seems that I was mistaken." So she's still not telling Laura why she's angry with her and why she's tearing up this chart. But she says, "You know, I thought you were an adult and you have been behaving like a little child." And then she just looks at Laura, and Laura says, "Please don't stare at me, Mother." Amanda closes her eyes and lowers her head. So she still does not say anything. You know, she's a great drama queen. And I love the character of Amanda Wingfield, but I really feel sorry for Laura because, you know, she's suffering. Amanda Wingfield manages to convey more through her silence than through her speech. So Amanda says, "What are we going to do? What is going to become of us? What is the future?" So again, oblique references, no direct references given as to why she's angry or why she's staring at Laura. She doesn't offer any explanation at all, and Laura becomes more and more nervous as time passes by, and she says, "Has something happened, Mother?" And Amanda draws a long breath, you know, making everything as dramatic as possible. And then she takes out the handkerchief again, and she dabs at her eyes, and she dabs at her lips, and she dabs at her nose, just the way you would if you had been crying very, very hard. But she's not been crying. This is just a gesture. This is a moment in which she can display to the audience that she has this very dainty white handkerchief, and she doesn't have a big rag with which to blow her nose. And so she continues to avoid Laura's questions until she thinks that it has had the maximum effect, and then she says, "I'll be all right in a minute. I'm just bewildered by life." She doesn't say, "Why did you not attend the college?" She takes her time because she knows that Laura will suffer more if Amanda gives out the information one piece at a time. If she just barging into the apartment and said, "Laura, why are you not attending college?" that would not have had the same effect as her silence and these slow, dramatic characteristics achieve. So she says, "I'll be all right in a minute." And Laura says, "I wish you'd tell me what happened." And then Amanda says, "You know, I was supposed to go to the D.A.R meeting, but I stopped off at Ruby Cam's because I wanted to tell them that you were not feeling well." Now, Ruby Cam's is the college that Laura Wingfield is supposed to be attending for a secretarial course which includes typing and shorthand. Now, Amanda Wingfield claims to come from a very well-established family, and one of her pet topics of discussion is how well placed she was before she got married, and how big a sacrifice she made when she got married, and look what she has got for it. So one of these organizations that she has attached herself to is the Daughters of the American Revolution. And there are all these women who sit around and, you know, who complain and who say, "Oh, what are things coming to? In my days this was the case, and we didn't do this thing in my days, and when I was young this is what I used to do, and when I was young I wasn't allowed to do blank, blank, blank." So it's an organization or a group of people who sit together, who claim to have common ancestors, and who also are very critical of what is happening in the world. They are critical of what is going on around them. They are particularly critical of the younger generation. So with a lot of keenness and with a lot of anticipation, Amanda Wingfield was to have been made a part of a committee, as she says, inducted into my office. And these are women who pride themselves on their honesty, integrity, the courage of their ancestors, etc., etc. And And so they sort of hold their head up high and say, nobody can compare with us. Now, Mrs. Wingfield says that I was supposed to go to the D.A.R. because I was going to be inducted into my office. I was going to be made a part of a select group of people. But when I stopped off at Rubicam's, I received information which made me so embarrassed, so ashamed, that I decided not to go to the D.A.R. meeting. And this information was that Laura Wingfield was not attending school. And school here, you know, in the American sense of the word, can be an institution, it can be a university, it can be any place of learning. So Mrs. Wingfield wants to keep an eye on Laura Wingfield, but by the time she decides that she has to keep an eye on Laura, the time has passed. Laura has stopped going there, and yet Mrs. Wingfield is unaware of this fact. So while they're having this discussion, she says that I stopped off at Rubicam's college because I wanted to tell them that you had a cold and would not be able to come to class. And I also wanted to find out your progress. So what happened was that when I get there and I say your name, nobody recognizes the name. And the typing instructor says, we don't have anyone like that in our school. Now this upsets Amanda Wingfield a lot. And when Laura Wingfield finds out that her mother has gone to the school in which she was enrolled, she becomes highly embarrassed, particularly because Mrs. Wingfield assures the administration of Rubicam's that her daughter has been attending school very, very regularly. So when she insists that Laura Wingfield has been attending classes, the instructor says, I wonder if you're talking about that very, very shy little girl who came for a few days and then she just disappeared. And Amanda says, no, my daughter Laura goes to school every day because that's what she tells her. Laura tells Amanda that she's attending school, that she's learning typing and shorthand. So it's been 6 weeks since she was put to school, and no one knows what to do with her because she was put to school and yet she's not going to school. She and in order to corroborate that sort of verbal remark, the instructor takes out the attendance register and says, see, Laura Wingfield's attendance has been marked for a few days only, and after that there is nothing. And Amanda, because she doesn't want to believe that her daughter can willfully deceive her, that her daughter can do anything like this, she says, no, there must have been some mistake. There's probably a confusion. Let me look in it. I'll go and check the records section. And the typing instructor says, no, you don't have to check the records. I'm telling you that she used to become very nervous when she was typing, and the first time that they had a speed test, and that is how fast can you take shorthand or how fast can you type, Laura Wingfield broke down completely, and she broke down in such a way that she started vomiting, and it was with a lot of trouble that they got her into the washroom. And the typing instructor says that the day she had this this vomiting was the last day on which she appeared. After that, she just disappeared and she did not go to college, even though she had paid the full fee and everything else. Amanda reacts again very theatrically. She reacts in the sense that she sits down on a stool, and her friends wonder how is it that she is being given such a lot of prominence. But the fact of the matter is that it has come as a great shock to Amanda that her daughter is not attending the college that she is supposed to be doing. So what bothers Amanda is that they had spent $50 for the tuition, $50 for the complete course. Of course, now if you were to convert the $50, it would come to something like 5,000, 6,000 rupees, let's say. And this is what goes on through Amanda's mind when she finds out that her daughter is not even attending college. So what about that fee I paid? You know, that's money which has just gone down the drain. It's not the kind of money that has been invested wisely. So when Laura moves, Mrs. Wingfield says, "What are you doing?" And Laura at once is very nervous and she stands up straight. You know, she has not been given room in which to grow. Throughout her life, Mrs. Wingfield's presence has managed to frustrate all of Laura's desires, and she has not allowed Laura to grow as an individual. Whatever she says is said to put Laura either on her guard, on her defensive, or she starts making excuses. So she has a very different nature from that of Mrs. Wingfield. And what concerns Amanda is where Laura has been going these days, these months, in fact, since she was enrolled in that school. She thinks the worst, but Laura says, "I've just been going out walking." Now, Amanda Wingfield is concerned because she thinks the worst. When Laura says that she's been out walking, she doesn't believe that anyone can do that, can go out and walk and walk and walk. So she says, "That's not true." But Laura says, "It is, you know, this is what I'm telling you. I've gone out walking." And Amanda says, "Walking in winter? What are you talking about? You're deliberately coating pneumonia in that light coat." So she's not supposed to have gone out walking. It's another thing to get off at the bus and rush into a warm building. But to get off the bus and to walk and walk in the winter is something that Amanda just cannot understand. And so she says, "Where did you walk to?" And Laura says, "All sorts of places, but mostly in the park." And now Amanda Wingfield starts to realize where Laura has caught that cold. She has caught a cold when she has been out walking and she's not been properly dressed. So she says, "You know, even after you'd started catching that cold." And Laura says, "It was the lesser of two evils, mother." Now this is a very important statement. In this one line, Laura manages to tell us a whole lot by referring to the lesser of the two evils. And it's the lesser of the two evils because she says the other thing was practicing typing in shorthand And that was too embarrassing because I threw up on the floor. So once that happened in front of everyone else, Laura says, I couldn't have gone back. You know, when you compare the evil of typing and shorthand in a room full of women who have seen you throwing up, that is very embarrassing. And walking around in the cold without any adequate warm clothing is still acceptable to going back and facing all those women who had seen her throwing up. And Amanda is shocked, and she says, from 7:30 till after 5 every day, do you mean to tell me you walked around in the park because you wanted to make me think that you were still going to Ruby Camp's business college? Are you mad? And Laura says, it wasn't as bad as it sounds. I went inside places to get warmed up. So, you know, Laura has her point of view, Amanda has her own. Amanda all of a sudden starts showing concern. And she says, what if you had died of cold there because you're not adequately dressed? And Laura says, it wasn't as bad as that. I went inside places to get warmed up also. And when Amanda asks inside where, Laura says, I went into the art museum and the bird houses at the zoo. I visited the penguins every day. Sometimes I did without lunch and went to the movies. So there's this little money that her mother gives her as allowance for lunch. And this money she has been stashing away so that she could go see movies. This fascination with movies is something that you find not only in Laura but also in Tom. Plus in Laura's case, as in Tom's case, the movie houses or the theaters or the cinemas, as you would call them nowadays, were warm places. And so if you could go there and sit for a couple of hours, you would be paying to get warm. So particularly on days that that Amanda asks about, Laura says that days where I had collected money from lunch every day, I spent in one go at the zoo or elsewhere. So she would rather starve than go back to that business college. So she says, lately I've been spending a lot of my afternoons in the jewel box, that big glass house where they raise the tropical flowers. So she spends a lot of time in the zoo, and particularly one special place which is called the jewel case, and that is where you have these beautiful tropical flowers that are very rich in color and in texture. So Amanda says, you did all this to deceive me? You know, why would you want to do that? And Laura says, you know, when you're disappointed, you get that awful suffering look on your face, like the picture of Jesus and Mother in the museum. So Laura, who has not spoken out much, and who in any case does not speak much in this play, does come out with her objections, and she says, you know, when you are angry or upset, you have this look on your face that says that you are a martyr, and that's a look that I cannot bear. That's the kind of look that you see on the face of the Virgin Mary at the time when Jesus is being taken for crucifixion. So she says, you know, you have as much of a suffering look as the Virgin Mary, and I don't want that. I don't want to see that. I cannot face it. And this is where, you know, you have the legend, the crust of humility coming in. And this legend, as I told you at the very beginning of the class, comes on the screen. Now, when the legend comes onto the screen, the crust of humility, it's a reference to Amanda being humiliated. Remember, she'd been very proud that she belonged to a very good family and she had a lot of people who wanted to marry her. All those dreams, all that nostalgia comes crashing down when she realizes that it is her own daughter who has been deceiving her, who has been practicing deception. And so Amanda comes up with these questions and she says, so what are we going to do the rest of our lives? What are we going to, where are we going to stay? Are we going to stay at home and watch movies all day? Or are you going to be listening to this worn out phonograph, that very old museum, that very old music that we have been storing for God knows how many years. So she asks this, and there's a lot of irony here because she speaks to Laura as a third person. When the third person plural, and she says, we won't have a business career. We've given that up because it gave us nervous indigestion. So she refers to we as a kind of way of making herself royal, and at the same time giving the impression that she's better off than her listeners. So she says, you know, you give up a business career because you have indigestion. That's not what you do. You have a whole lot of other things that form a part of life. And if you choose not to have a career, I don't know how we're going to live, because your father didn't leave me any money at all, and I have this apartment to maintain. I have the two of you to look after. I just do not know how I'll be able to do it. And here Amanda makes a reference to something that has that we have in common with what she calls the South. Remember, this play is about the southern states and the values that the Southerners had, the values of life, and how they considered themselves as being better than those who lived in the northern states. So Amanda says, what is going to become of us? Where are we going to go? Are we going to spend our whole lives living in humility? Because I have seen a lot of cases where women do not get married, and towards the end of their lives they have to be dependent either on a sister's husband or on a brother's wife, because they lack security, because they do not have financial backing. So they have to adjust themselves to the different natures and temperaments of their siblings, in-laws, or their siblings' spouses. So she says, you have no idea what a terrible, terrible situation that is, because each morsel of food that you put in your mouth is dreaded. is grudged to you, and that is what you are aiming towards. If you do not want to get married because you say that you don't know people. I wanted you to have a career, but you think that it gives you nervous indigestion, so you never went back to college in spite of the fact that we paid $50 tuition fee, and that was a $50 that I could have ill afforded, and that we could have used to get a whole lot of things for the family. But you went and you just wasted that money. So she says, you know, you have no idea what harsh circumstances face you if A, you do not get married, and B, you are unable to support yourself financially. It's always women who cannot support themselves financially who are looked down upon by society, because they become they become creatures that are dependent on other people, and so they're not the kind of people who are looked up to and appreciate. Their parasitic features prevent any appreciation or any understanding of their situation, and that is the kind of thing that you can look forward to, because you neither plan to get married nor do you plan to take up a job. And women who are financially dependent are looked down upon, are treated with a lot of contempt by society. So she says, is this what you want to do? So Amanda says, is this what you want to do? And Laura, you know, is just nervous. She just cannot say anything. She doesn't know what to do, what to say. And particularly when Amanda says, haven't you ever liked some boy? And Laura says, yes, I liked one once. I came across his picture a while ago. And this is where you have a twist in the action, as they call it. And she says, yes, I did like a boy once, and I came across his picture. Shall I show it to you? And Amanda says, he gave you his picture? And she says, no, it's in the yearbook. It's in the school yearbook. And Amanda says, oh, a high school boy. And just when she says a high school boy, on the screen there is this image of Jim, who was a high school hero, and he's holding a silver cup. So very handsome young boy, and that's the one that that Laura says she liked. And when Amanda says, you know, oh, it was way back in high school, and Laura says, yes, his name was Jim. And she lifts that yearbook from the table, and she says, you know, this is his photo in the school play. So Jim had acted in the school play, and there's his photograph. And Amanda cannot sort of make sense of what Laura is saying, because she says, what? And she says, and Laura says that there was this operetta that the senior class had put on for the school, and because Jim had a wonderful voice, and we participated in the same play. This is his picture from that play. So she shows the yearbook, and in the yearbook she shows her mother a picture of Jim as he appeared in that play. And Amanda just, you know, very casually looks at it, and she says, oh, he must have been a nice boy. And Laura says, he used to call me Blue Roses. and the image on the screen is that of blue roses. And Amanda says, why did he call you such a name as that? You know, it doesn't make any sense. Why should anyone call you blue roses? And Laura says, when I had that attack of pleurosis, he asked me what was the matter when I came back. And when I told him that I had pleurosis, he says, oh, so you have blue roses. It's something that he doesn't hear right. But from that point onwards, Jim calls her blue roses, and for Laura, that's a sign of affection. For Laura, that is a sign that he has a special feeling for Laura. But because Jim was a high school hero, he already had a girlfriend by the name of Emily Meisenbach. And because Laura likes Jim herself, she says, you know, I didn't like the girl he went out with. She wasn't really worthy of him. And so a little, you know, jealousy coming in, a little green face coming in spite of the fact that Emily was the best dressed girl. She came from a very well-to-do family. But, you know, Laura thinks that she wasn't really the sincere type because she had a lot of money and she came from a very wealthy background, etc., etc. But that was 6 years ago. And Amanda says girls that aren't cut out for business careers usually wind up married to some nice man. And here, you know, the hit is obviously at Laura because she doesn't seem to attract men. She doesn't go out anywhere. Nobody comes to meet her. And so for Amanda, there are only two categories of women: those who take up careers and those who marry. There are no other categories as far as Amanda knows. And she says that those girls who didn't want to study or who didn't want to take up careers, they quickly got married after high school, and that was it. And there's a certain sort of a hankering for one of the same situations being true of her daughter, that is Laura Wingfield. The strange thing is that she continues to call Laura sister. And this is something that is very peculiar of conversations in the southern states at that time. You know, instead of saying friend or mother or niece or aunt, they would say sister woman or just sister. So Amanda addresses Laura in the same way because what she wants to show is how much concern she feels towards her, as well as the fact that she comes from the South, and as such she knows how a lady should act, how a lady should speak, etc., etc. So this conversation continues, and Amanda gives hints to Laura that you know, she should also be getting married now. And Laura says, I'm crippled. Now Amanda, because she's a mother and because she is ambitious for her daughter and for her son, she says, nonsense, Laura. I've told you never to use that word. You're not crippled. You just have a slight defect. And it's hardly noticeable. When people have some slight disadvantage like that, they cultivate other things to make up for it. Develop charm and vivacity and charm. That's all you have to do. So she is bent on Laura getting married. Now that she realizes that Laura cannot have a career, she will get Laura married off no matter what happens. So she says, you know, if you have a slight defect, and you know Laura has a slight limp, she says when you have a slight defect, you try to cover it up by cultivating something else, by being charming, by being very pleasant. The point is that Laura is also very shy. She is very, very nervous, and she gets very tense when she is in company that she does not know. So now while this action is taking place, the scene fades out with music, and the legend on the screen is after the fiasco. Meanwhile, you see Tom standing on the side and playing his fiddle, or what you would call his violin. So he's standing at the fire escape landing, and there is this violin that has been placed on the stage, and he motions to that, and when he does that, there is of course very soft music, and the scene continues with Tom saying, and he's where he enters as narrator. You know, he's not the character in the play anymore. And he says, after the fiasco at Rubicam's business college, the idea of getting a gentleman caller for Laura began to play a more and more important part in Mother's calculations. It became an obsession. Like some archetype of the universal unconscious, the image of the gentleman caller haunted our small apartment. Now we're going to stop here with this image on the screen of a young man with flowers. But before I leave off, I'm going to go over what we have done today and try to link it up with what we've done before, so that in the next class, when we continue from this point, you have no problem in recalling what we have done. The part that we did today is the portion where we see Laura sitting before the chart of the typewriter, which shows the positioning of the different letters of the alphabet. And she does that as soon as she hears her mother's footstep, so that when her mother enters, she's already seated before the chart. Now when her mother enters, she does it with a lot of theatricality, and it's difficult for Laura to understand why her mother is playing the drama queen, as I told you. So she takes off her gloves, and she puts her hat off, she puts her purse down, and all the time she's like, she's taking deep breaths, she's sighing, and Laura gets more and more nervous, and she says, "What's the matter, mother? Why are you upset?" And Mrs. Wingfield will not tell her what is bothering her. Finally, when Laura says, "Please tell me what is bothering you," Mrs. Wingfield comes out with the story, and she tells Laura that she had gone to Rubicam's business college, where Laura was supposed to be doing a shorthand and typing course. And she had found out that Laura had not been attending classes. So then she asks Laura where she had been, and Laura tells her mother that she's been out walking. For her, it was such a big issue with learning how to do shorthand and typing, that she decides not to go back after she throws up. You know, they have the speed typing test, and the day they have that test, Laura throws up. She throws up in front of the whole class, and she becomes so weak that she can hardly be carried to the washroom. And after that room, she stops going to the college. She prefers to walk outside even in winter, rather than go back and face those girls and face the instructor after that fiasco. So she takes what she considers to be the easy way out. As she tells her mother, it was the lesser of two evils. The greater evil for her would have been to go back to face those girls again and the instructor, because she had made a mess in the college. So she gives this as an excuse or as the reason to Amanda, but Amanda is not convinced, and she says, you know, what is going to become of you? You say that you are a cripple and you cannot get married, you're not willing to have a career. What will happen to you? And all the time, you know, she's looking at this portrait of Laura's father, who had a lot of charm, and in fact it is this charm that had actually won Amanda Wingfield when, according to her, she had a lot of other men who were willing to marry her. So she says, you know, when you have a small defect, you cultivate other things, you cultivate charm, you cultivate wit. And Laura says, I'm a cripple. And when she uses the word cripple, Amanda Wingfield becomes very upset, because she's never admitted to herself the fact that Laura is a cripple. She has a limp, she has difficulty in walking, but she will not admit that, because to her, her children are perfect, because they are hers. So she will not admit to Laura having a disability, but Laura is aware of ground realities, and she's not at all willing to get married or to adopt a career. And when Amanda says, you know, this is something that we have to think about, because I have seen what becomes of women who turn into spinsters. I've seen a lot of these women, and they become either dependent on their brothers' wives or on their sisters' husbands, and that is charity of one kind. So if you do not, if you cannot think of getting married, and if you have dropped out of the business college, then I do not see any other future for you. So from this point onwards, you see Amanda making a very conscious, deliberate attempt to get Laura married off, and this is the point where Tom comes in as narrator, and he says that from this time forward, all of Amanda's efforts were towards getting what she calls the gentleman caller to come for Laura. We're going to stop here. Thank you for being patient, and we'll continue this in the next lesson. Thank you, and Allah Hafiz.